I'm really always curious about how people build businesses. And I don't really, it's not the linear trajectory that everybody has in mind. Like, okay, we stop, we go in one way, we go another or something like that. But it's rather like this, and then there's an outcome. But people just see the beginning and say, oh, how successful you are today. And they have no idea what happened in between. So the idea.
And then if you add the solar component, it is like this before you get to the end zone.
Well, and you have wind and solar, and you have a business that correlates directly with the growth of the industry. I think I assumed.
Hey everybody, welcome again to Renewables Unscripted. We're excited to have new visitors today to talk about their businesses, how they grew, and how the entrepreneurial process worked for them. Who have we got today?
Today, we have William from EnergeiaWorks, a matchmaking company or recruiter for the renewable energy industry, where he's matchmaking people and companies in the midst of a huge labor shortage right now in the industry. So really excited to hear about his journey today. Let's jump into it. William, welcome to the show. You're talking about having to have resilience in renewables. What does that mean, having ridden, I guess, the solar coaster? I don't know if there's an analogy in wind, the wind coaster. I don't know what that is. Tell us a little bit about your journey, just introducing EnergeiaWorks and yourself to our listeners today.
Sure, yeah, and there's definitely one in wind as well, because there's the PTC, the production tax credit, and I do very much remember when that completely fell off the cliff. Eventually, it did get renewed, but the wind industry disappeared overnight. Fortunately, solar, I think, did a better job with the ITC because you've got resi, CNI, and utility scale. So you've got various markets that won't just completely crumble. So yeah, there's definitely on the wind side, there's definitely the PTC that fell off the cliff. But introducing myself, I'm the CEO and founder of EnergeiaWorks, where we are an executive recruiting and staffing firm that focuses exclusively on renewables. That's the only thing that we do. Because it's such a small industry, we have to focus on everyone and everything within the industry. So we work with organizations that do research and development and manufacturing, all the way downstream to construction and O&M. So what that means is we kind of have to be a jack of all trades and really understand the industry as a whole, from manufacturing to engineering of projects to the software piece of it as well, and really be able to have those in-depth conversations. Because at the end of the day, these customers are buying from me and our track record, EnergeiaWorks, but we do have to understand the way an entire project does come together.
That's interesting. You talk about how it all comes together and they're buying from you. That was one of the interesting things I thought is, like, how do you start some of this? How do you start building that credibility in the industry and start eating into it? What was that like for you?
Oh, it's a great story. So, I spent 10 years at the previous recruiting firm I was a partner at. And after 10 years and 2 recessions, I decided that it was time to try something new. And I knew I wanted to try something on my own, but I didn't know exactly what. And I guess fortuitously, I was sharing office space with a solar nonprofit called Solar One in New York City. Mm-hmm. And it was shortly after the time that the first investment tax credit was signed into legislation. So it got me reading more about solar. And I was thinking, okay, private equity and venture capitalists are much smarter than me. Maybe this could be a real big employer in the US market. So I decided to start a company in solar I knew nothing about. Outside of reading a few articles. I decided to leave my business partner. I moved to my beach house in New Jersey, and I asked my partner, my wife, to commute 4 hours a day while I start this new company with no contacts and no income and no revenue. So that was a fun conversation.
I can only imagine.
Yes.
What was her reaction to that?
Yeah, she was on board for the short period of time. And then once we got to a year, she's like, something's got to change here. Fortunately, it did. But I can tell you that what I did with my very first success, the first check that I got, was with you guys might remember a company called Power One, the inverter manufacturer. That was my very first placement in the industry back in 2011. And the very first thing I did with that check is I booked a ticket to SPI. I think it was in Dallas or Atlanta that year. I think it was Dallas, because I understand the value of having those in-person meetings to generate business, because people are in a services business, especially people are buying from you. So I knew I needed to get out there. That's something I did in the previous company that I owned. I knew I needed to get out there and shake hands and meet as many people as possible because they were buying from me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how did you establish that credibility, right? In services, they're buying from you, but you mentioned earlier, it's like, and I established this track record, but a track record is established over time, right? It's, you cannot just go into it right away. So how did you establish that credibility to make sure, hey, I guess you have the background. You've been 10 years in recruiting before that. So that's kind of the first stamp of approval. It's like, hey, I've done this, albeit in a different industry. But how do you kind of bring it to the next level? Like, hey, I understand your business. I understand your needs, and I'm a credible partner here.
Yeah, two things is, of course, fake it till you make it. And the second piece of that is recruiting is about process. Once you understand the process of recruiting, you can do it in any industry. I mean, at EnergeiaWorks, we've filled positions in Hong Kong, Chile, Singapore, all over Western Europe, and we built networks from the ground up in those instances. So once you understand the process of recruiting, you can do it in any industry. It was just about me getting out there, faking it until I make it, and just taking that one win at a time and having it snowball to the next one and take that experience and bring it to the next search that we took on.
So was this easier or harder than not being in renewables?
I would say, I got my start in recruiting at the height of the .com era. So it was easy then. We sent people on an interview that had a heartbeat, and if they showed up, they got a job offer. So you made money fairly quickly. So in renewables, it was definitely tough. It was a new industry at the time, back in 2010, 2011. And, we're not inexpensive. I think our average fee size is about $25,000, $35,000. So nobody really wants to pay that fee unless they have to. So the first couple of years we were going from win to win, and that got us to the next step.
Did you find that was really how it started, was like one-off sales? It really took a while to get that momentum going in those pieces. And where was the real spot where it changed, where it flipped? That tipping point you see your business start to move?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that was probably after the third year. The first year or two, we were going from sale to sale. Once we hit that third year, we had a track record to speak of. We had a little bit of a brand recognition at that point, getting out at every conference and every trade show. So that helped. And then we hit a few roadblocks, right? With the ITC expiring, that kind of hurt us 1 year. So we had a downturn in the business. I mentioned earlier, on the production tax credit side for the wind, that hurt us 1 year. Other than that, we've had lots of good years with those two blimps on our track record.
So your business is directly, like a lot of entrepreneurs talk about, recession-proof businesses. You talked about living through 2 recessions in your previous business and going into renewables, which is, I'm going to say, not recession-proof. Or it should
almost
be.
The opposite.
Exactly, right? So what's your view there? Have you tried anything to decouple your business, or how are you hedging for that tightly coupled kind of business model that you have here?
I've been trying, and it's interesting because everything was going well leading up to 2020. We were having very stable growth, where we can handle the growth that we had and we're able to scale. And then all of a sudden the pandemic happened, and I'm like, all right, 75% of our customers just went on a hiring hold because of the uncertainty. So I'm thinking to myself, all right, am I about to go through another recession here? Like, what is going to happen with my business that, as an entrepreneur, all you do is think about your business from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. And I'm sure you're the same, Etienne. You can't turn it off, for better or worse. It's just in your DNA. And at the time, I had 2 things in mind. Let's focus on letting everybody on my team know that they are stable. You have a job here, regardless that 3/4 of our customers went away, you're getting a paycheck. we're going to be here. Fortunately, we took advantage of the PPP loan. But the funny thing happened a few months into the recession. We had our customers start to trickle back by the summer, and then the election happened. And when the election happened, then I could circle the Saturday on the calendar when the election was called for the Biden administration, because I was at an outdoor birthday party, of course, and all of a sudden I live in a fairly liberal town, and all of a sudden the horns start honking, people are jumping out of cars, and the town is just going crazy. And I checked my phone, and of course Biden won. And as you know, it's sometimes very difficult to talk about renewables without talking about politics too. And the onset of the Biden administration is we're getting back into the Paris Accord. We've got a federal government behind us in supporting renewable energy. So what does that mean for everybody that's working in solar? Is a clear path to growth for the next couple of years. And when organizations think that they have a clear path to growth and that uncertainty is gone, what do? Hire. They hire, they spend money on marketing and advertising, and they get back out there in earnest. But what happened in November of 2020 is everybody in our industry did it at the same time. So all of a sudden we went from like, okay, where's our next check coming in from? Which customers are on hold? To all of a sudden our phone is ringing off the hook. And in recruiting, you have to do the business development. You have to go chase the companies that want to pay your fee, and then you have to go fulfill the service. Since November of 2020, we haven't had to do business development. And that's the first time that I haven't had to do BD in 22 years of my career. So it's kind of a funny situation. In the first couple of months, I'm like fielding it, like playing ping pong, and we're able to keep up. But eventually it's like, all right, this is not sustainable. So we got to figure out how we do this without sacrificing service delivery. And that was the challenging part for us. All of a sudden we've got a fire hose of leads coming in, and we're trying to service them all. It's not easy.
Did you scale your own team accordingly, or what did you do to kind of manage that onslaught, right? It's people, process, and technology, right? Those are the three levers that you have. So right. What's the equation that you solved for there, William?
I tried to solve all three at the same time. So what I did was we doubled our team since November of 2020. So we've got 20 people right now. Let's say 2/3 are in the US and 1/3 are in Canada. I brought in an executive coach and started scaling the company using the EO system, the Entrepreneur Operating System. So we're following a system now that's going to help us scale in a very structured way. We brought in an executive coach that helps us lead through EQ, and that has helped us scale in a couple of different ways. Scale in the right way, treat our people like human beings that want to be here. We weren't spending any money on trade shows and conferences, obviously, during the pandemic. We just started ramping that back up. So what I did is I took that budget and I put that into team building and professional development. So, we took virtual trips to Barcelona and Paris, and we had gift baskets sent to everybody on our team. We started a lunch and learn Zoom meeting where we bring in solar experts, somebody that's out there building construction. They come in and tell us what it's like on a day-to-day. So I really focused on the cultural aspect of my team to make sure, because I kind of knew what was coming, right? Like, if there's such a demand like this for our service, what does that mean? Companies are going to be scrambling to retain people. So I knew that was imminent. And I focused on developing my team, developing the right way, make sure everybody is happy, make sure everybody is earning money, and make sure that they're learning too. I like the idea of maintaining and retaining your team. I remember you wrote an article a little ways back about the Great Resignation and how that's impacting. How are you seeing that play out, especially in the renewables industry? I mean, it looks like you're already doing things because you're worried about it. So What are you seeing in the industry? Yeah, I was worried about it, I think, before anybody started writing articles about it, for sure. And it's kind of hitting us from both sides, right? Because we're dealing with the resignation and we're dealing with an influx of growth in renewables, which on one hand it's great because it's everything that I've been wishing for the last decade. And everybody that works in solar has been wishing for this too. but it's too much all at once, and it's not very sustainable for the long haul for a couple different reasons. Just to give you some data points, so leading up to 2020, most years we saw somebody change jobs, go from job A to job B, and they got roughly a 10 to 12% increase in total compensation. In 2021, we saw that over 30%. And
Wow.
there is bidding wars going on for the first time, and this is relatively new, the last couple of months, 4 or 5 months. We're seeing sign-on bonuses in solar. Like, this is the stuff of the .com era that they were dealing with back then. And we have this in front of us now. So we've got the Great Resignation. It's an employee-driven market, which means they are dictating what they want: flexibility, work from home, childcare, everything that the last 2 years has put in front of us when it comes to working remotely. We're dealing with, and at hyper speed as well.
That's super interesting. And so we have trends of labor shortages, great resignations, hyper growth in parallel. So are you seeing, I'm a software guy, right? So I see people, process, and technology, and I think technology, right? You can't really say. So are you seeing clients investing in tools to reduce needs on people? Are you seeing that dynamic at play, or is there so much growth that it's kind of hidden in the footnote?
I'm not sure there's the ability outside of manufacturing when it comes to automation to be able to reduce the people. Because we're talking about project development, we're talking about engineering, we're talking about construction and O&M, and you really need physical bodies to do that type of work. So I'm not sure how much automation there can be done there. I'm sure there's some. So we just have to deal with what's in front of us here when it comes to the challenges of talent acquisition. And few of the reasons why this is concerning, even though it's great for my business. And, last year we had 115% growth, which I'm super stoked about. But too much all at once, what happens is you create salary inequities within organizations where it's not sustainable. So, for example, you bring in a development engineer 2 years ago, maybe they were making $120,000. This year, it's going to cost you $160,000. And if you have 4 development engineers, 3 of them are under market, 1 of them is over market, what happens? And not to mention, getting into the nuts and bolts of the entire supply chain, not just human capital, is supply chain shortages, rises in cost and modules, if you can get them right now because of the commerce decision. At what point does a project not pencil anymore if you're building like a utility scale project? Because you've got the rise in equipment, modules, delays in the projects, and then you've got the rise in human capital too. Maybe I'm slightly concerned about private equity investors pulling out of the industry because they're not getting an ROI anymore.
That's interesting.
That's going to happen anyways, right? We're moving to longer term money. There's too much cash in the industry, and it's about how we deploy it. So I think you're right. So you'll see we're moving away from the higher source or higher cost of capital sources to lower cost of capital. I think that's inevitable, and that's means we're establishing ourselves as a robust asset class. So actually I think that makes sense, but obviously the worries about the people, the inequities that you've just talked about. I remember we used to do this every year, and my philosophy is that if I put everybody's salaries and roles on a big billboard and everybody sees it, it makes sense. So funny enough, we've hired a lot of people over the last 2 years and so on. So we've actually had to scale up salaries across the board in a variety of roles to make sure that internal equity component is very valid. So I don't know if my team is listening to this right now. It's like, it's true what's happening. We have an external data point that's pointing out at it. So what other strategies have you seen companies use or implement to kind of manage the people aspect better or more proactively in their business, William?
Yeah, and just adding on to your last comment, when it comes to equity, good for you for being on top of that. There are states in the U.S. now that require salaries to be written on the job description, and we're just getting started there. So like equity is a big part of the total DEIJ movement right now that's going on. I think solar is doing a really good job compared to the rest of the employment market. Of course, we can do better, but lots more to come when it comes to equity and making sure that everybody is paid equally.
Well, I think that's a great thing, right? When we ask candidates, like, what are your salary expectations? That brings bias to the conversation right away, right? So I actually think it's a great idea to be as transparent and kind of diversify our recruiting sources and things like that. So are you doing some work on that, trying to diversify where you source candidates from that DEI perspective?
Yeah, most definitely. And I can tell you, so we're about 11 and a half years into EnergeiaWorks right now. The last 2 years, I've had more requests for diversity searches than the previous 9 years of the organization. That's how much our industry is thinking about that topic right now.
Cool. Let's bring this back to about you for a little bit, because I'm curious about how you scaled and grew over the years. You talked about PPP loans and stuff like that. Was there any other sources you brought in to help you scale that you need? Did you need to go chase money or anything?
No, I explored it before and then decided that, somebody wants too much of my business, that, it's kind of like my firstborn child, right? And I decided just to scale off of our own balance sheet.
Do you think that hindered you, or do you think that actually made a longer term advantage to you growing in that method?
I think it was an advantage at first. But when I talked earlier about what happened in November of 2020 and the amount of business that came in, I think it may have held us back a little bit. But right now, the thing that's holding us back, just like the industry is having problem with hiring, we're hiring too, but we can't hire fast enough to keep up with the demand. So in a way, even if I had that capital and I brought in private equity to do that, for example, I'm not sure I'd still be able to keep up.
Cool.
Interesting. Our first guest on the show lightened kind of the entrepreneurial journey to kind of riding a tiger, right? Or riding a lion, actually. So you're kind of riding the lion. You wake up one morning, you're like, shit, I'm on a lion. All other people are looking around, it's like, wow, this guy has his shit together. He's riding a lion full speed through the savannah. That's amazing. And you're on the lion, hanging on for dear lives, trying not to get eaten, not hit in the face by a branch, and so on. So is that a feeling you mentioned in the openings? It's like entrepreneurs don't have time to play golf. So tell me about how it is on a personal level. And I completely agree, by the way. It's way too long of a game. I don't have the 4 hours or 6 hours to spend out there. I'll do something else. But tell me about your journey on kind of that basis, that raw perspective that you're bringing forward.
Yeah, for sure. It was sustainable for a lot of years where I had a good balance of chasing business, getting business, and delivering business. But definitely the last 2 years, drinking from a fire hose and working until very late at night, you still feel like you never got enough. You still feel like you didn't get enough done that day. It's also not sustainable for the long haul too. It's very stressful. As an entrepreneur, your name is on the brand. And, I'll be honest with you, we've got some frustrated customers right now. And, maybe they're reflecting it towards us, but the real frustration is the employment market. In the US, we have a historically low unemployment rate right now. In the solar market, there is no unemployment market. So we are out there headhunting and cold calling and trying to generate active candidates that way. And that is affecting our service delivery. But that is keeping me up at night and losing sleep, is when we have frustrated customers, they're frustrated at me, right? They're frustrated at the company, but that's a reflection of me.
Yeah, that's got to be tough to hang on to and hold on to. So what's next? Where are you going to after this? How you keeping EnergeiaWorks going? Do you have any crazy pie in the sky new ventures you're getting into?
Yeah, so I think it was about 6 years ago, I also launched a networking event series for professionals that work in renewable energy called Renewables Unwind. Kind of started just getting some local New York friends together for beers that worked in the solar industry after work. And they invited their friends and they invited their friends. And then at some point I said, all right, we got over 100 people here. Like, is there a way to monetize this business? So we started doing it in conjunction with some of the conferences out there. and we started taking sponsorship money. And the last couple of years has been a profitable business. We actually just relaunched it. Next week, we're in San Antonio for Clean Power. And we've got, I think, 6 sponsors for that event. So it's a great place for people to come and talk to fellow like-minded professionals that work in renewable energy. We did try to do a launch at SPI last year, but you guys know what happened there. So we had
I have
to,
no idea.
yeah, we lost a little money canceling all our venue and our tickets and everything, but we're happy to get things started again next week in San Antonio.
Awesome.
The other thing that I've been trying to do is, prior to the pandemic started, I started thinking about the parallels between the cannabis industry and renewable energy. And I put together a business plan to launch a recruiting firm that's focused on the cannabis market. Because I think that it's still it's still in its infancy right now, but I think it has the potential to be a solar industry over time. So I wanted to start that early, and I put all the pieces together. We launched the company in December of 2019. We went to our first conference, and then the pandemic happened. And I'm like, all right, it's a good idea to turn this off for a little bit while we focus on our revenue producing business. And we're trying to launch that again this year, if we have enough time to do it.
Cool. What's the name of this one?
EnergeiaWorks.
Sometimes.
Well, I think that's
unintended.
I think that's a great closing note. I think the journey is an interesting one. William, thanks so much for sharing today about your ride through the solar coaster. We'll have to find a name for kind of the wind production tax credit aspect of it. And basically at the same time launching parallel businesses. But I think you summed it up very well, that focus is important. And golfing as an entrepreneur is overrated.
That's a different story altogether. Another question.
So,
well, thank you,
so
Etienne
much,
and James, for having me. I really appreciate being here today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure and a fun ride too.